What if I told you that a single window in Prague triggered a war that wiped out a third of Central Europe's population and birthed the modern world as we know it? Today, we're diving into the Westphalian Order, the era where the rules of money, power, and nations were written in blood and silver. The complex geopolitical balance of today is rooted in the massive economic, military, and political shifts of the last 500 years. Between 1648 and 1789, a mechanism was set in motion that fundamentally changed how the world operates. To understand the modern international system, we must look back at the Peace of Westphalia, the treaty that ended the catastrophic 30 Years' War. The 30 Years' War, 1618 to 1648, was a conflict of unprecedented scale. Almost all of Europe, except for England, was drawn into this meat grinder. It began as a religious clash between the Catholic League, led by Austria, Spain, Bavaria, and the Catholic German principalities, and the Protestant League, which included the Kingdom of Bohemia, Sweden, the Dutch Republic, Prussia, and several others. However, by its final phase, the war transformed into a raw power struggle. Catholic France, in a brilliant move of realpolitik, joined the Protestant side to crush the Catholic Habsburgs of Austria and Spain. The leader of the Catholic League, the Habsburg Emperor, was also the Holy Roman Emperor, a title presiding over a loose confederation of hundreds of principalities and dukedoms. The Habsburg Empire was the superpower of the era, the primary rival of the Ottoman Empire, and a dynasty that held crowns across Europe through complex lineages. Like many great tragedies, this war began with a seemingly minor incident. When Catholic imperial representatives traveled to Prague and argued with Protestant nobles, they were thrown out of the windows of Prague Castle. This Defenestration of Prague was the spark. The emperor, believing it was time to eradicate the Protestant heretics for once and for all, mobilized his armies. As the Catholic League began to crush the Protestant principalities in Bohemia and northern Germany, Sweden, a rising power, entered the fray. Their reason was strategic. If the Habsburgs swallowed the German states, Sweden would find itself sharing a border with a hostile Catholic superpower. France's entry into the war was even more pragmatic. If the small German principalities became part of a centralized Habsburg Empire, France would be surrounded. It would face a massive power to its east and its old rival, Catholic Spain, to its south. To survive, Catholic France had to ensure the Habsburgs failed. The human cost was staggering. In the heart of the conflict, modern-day Germany and Central Europe, it is estimated that 30 to 40% of the population perished. Great cities were burned like dry kindling. Civilians were killed without distinction. On top of the violence, the plague ravaged the survivors. Approximately 8 million people died. To put this in perspective, at the start of the 16th century, the Ottoman Empire had 27 million people, while France had 15 million, and England only 4.5 million. The loss of life was a demographic earthquake. The war finally ended when the Habsburg strength was exhausted. Spain had already spent 80 years trying to crush the Dutch revolt and suffered a humiliating defeat against France. Not even the endless flow of gold and silver from the Americas could save the Spanish treasury. With the peace, France emerged as the dominant power on the continent. The Habsburgs were forced to accept that they could never conquer the Protestant German states. This marked the beginning of a long decline for the Habsburgs that would end only in 1918. Interestingly, the Ottoman Empire was too exhausted to capitalize on this European chaos. While Europe fought, the Ottomans were dealing with massive internal rebellions. Furthermore, the empire's economy was being shattered by international inflation, the direct result of the massive influx of American silver into European markets over the previous 90 years. In this era, gold and silver formed the global monetary base. As the global supply of precious metals surged, any state that couldn't increase its own reserves saw its wealth evaporate through precious metal inflation. Despite its vast manpower, the Ottoman Empire reached its geographic limits. It could not push past the Western Mediterranean, the Sahara,
or the fortified Austrian and Iranian borders. Its agricultural wealth was being drained by inconclusive border wars. More importantly, global trade routes were shifting from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. The multi-ethnic, multi-religious late medieval identity of the Ottoman Empire was becoming increasingly difficult to manage. Even military technology had shifted. A new system of fortifications called the Tres Italiane, star-shaped forts with low, thick, angled walls, now lined the borders from the Adriatic to Transylvania. These forts were incredibly resistant to Ottoman siege artillery. While the Austrians developed new field artillery and musket infantry formations, the old Ottoman military superiority vanished. The Westphalian peace did more than just end religious wars. It gathered all parties at a table as recognized state identities. It established an international order based on a relative balance of power. Most importantly, it officially recognized the economic and political sovereignty of every state over its own territory. Under the Westphalian Order, the political and economic power of the papacy began an irreversible decline. The first power to challenge this new balance was France, the war's greatest victor. Under the leadership of powerful chief ministers like Cardinal Richelieu and Cardinal Mazarin, France built a formidable centralized state. Jean-Baptiste Colbert, the brilliant finance minister and son of a provincial clothier, established a modern tax system to fund France's endless wars. A new class of meritocratic bureaucrats replaced the old nobility in government. By 1700, France was a titan. With a population of 19 million, it dwarfed England's 9 million and the Habsburgs' 8 million. Its army of 400,000 soldiers was equal to the combined forces of the rest of Europe. France would spend the next century, from 1648 to 1763, fighting for total European hegemony. Meanwhile, England was forging a different path. After a bloody civil war between Parliament and the King, 1642 to 1651, which ended in the execution of Charles I, the foundations of a new order were laid. This process culminated in the Glorious Revolution of 1688, a bloodless transition that established the British constitutional monarchy. This was the true beginning of the world's journey towards modern democracy. Britain became the first modern state where the powers of the Parliament, the government, and the Crown were clearly separated. The Bill of Rights of 1689 limited the King's power, defined the rights of Parliament, and protected individual rights. It established free elections, freedom of speech in Parliament, and the rule that taxes could only be levied by law. This political stability allowed Britain to become a global superpower by 1763. The Westphalian Peace and the Glorious Revolution were the launchpads for the Age of Enlightenment. They bridged the gap between the Renaissance and the modern era. Throughout the 18th century, British diplomacy focused on one goal: preventing France from becoming the sole master of Europe by building powerful coalitions. During this time, the Ottoman Empire saw a brief revival under the Koprulu family and turned its sights back on Vienna. However, the siege of Vienna ended in a disastrous defeat, followed by the Great Turkish War, where the Ottomans lost Hungary, Transylvania, and more. The empire began its long downward spiral. France fought for colonial dominance in North America, the Caribbean, India, and Africa. But British diplomacy and its superior navy systematically stripped France of its colonies. Wars like the 9 Years' War and the War of Spanish Succession maintained the status quo in Europe. However, the 7 Years' War, 1756 to 1763, the first truly global war, changed everything. While France suffered a crushing economic and military defeat, Britain became the world's undisputed superpower. France lost Canada, its territories east of the Mississippi, and its influence in India. But this global conflict had another side effect: the American Revolutionary War. To pay off its massive war debts, Britain imposed new taxes on its 13 colonies. This clash between the economic theory of mercantilism and the colonies' desire for autonomy led to war. With French and Spanish support, George Washington defeated the British, and the United States was born as a unique federal republic. For Britain, this was a loss. For the French treasury, it was the final nail in the coffin. The economic collapse caused by these wars combined with bad harvests ignited the powder keg, the French Revolution. This revolution would become the ultimate turning point for the international order. The Westphalian system promised stability, but it couldn't stop the hunger for empire or the cry for liberty. As the fires of the French Revolution began to spread, the world realized that the old rules were about to be rewritten once again. If you enjoyed this journey through financial and economic history, don't forget to subscribe. The story of how money and power shape our world is far from over.